again slightly with the interview, and this is part of this residency is the technical hitches of trying to figure out how to use multiple different softwares, multiple different tools. This is, and trying to do something for the world. So can we restart?
Absolutely. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, probably most of you, I'm Jake Harris. I'm the Director of Art at Access Space, and Susanne and Camille have been online residents, artists in residence online for the last, I think, couple of weeks. So the first question is about the title, the Intangible Threshold title. Right now, we're all going through a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of things are unknowable and intangible, and I thought it was quite an apt title. How did you come up with it?
I'll have to let you take over these first few questions because I was distracted, Susanne.
Okay, intangible. It relates to, or has been derived from, as Camille said earlier, which you didn't hear, we had several discussions about what the title could be, and the intangible, I think, derived from the issues around touch that we investigated. That basically in today's times, where everything happens online, even social work, everything, the big thing that sticks out is that we can't touch each other. And that also relates to, of course, to COVID, where we're not allowed to touch each other, even if we meet in person. So we did a lot of experiments and investigations in and around touch and intangible. The intangible threshold relates to the digital media, where you can get close, but you can never really touch each other.
Can't really go through the screen.
Interface.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Are you able to say something to this, Camille?
Yeah, I mean, just that idea of the threshold that you just brought up, this interface is, we're always on the edge of it, but we can never get through it. We can never pass through it. So it's an ongoing intangible threshold because we can never pass through. So yeah, it was all that Susanne said, but we were trying to figure out. I mean, the title came a bit late actually because we were playing around with all these aspects of touch and connection and communication and collaboration, and then trying to figure out what are we calling this. So that was a lot of time spent on thinking about that.
Okay, and the initial process, when you first got in touch with each other, and how did you deal with the situation that you were very distant, very remote, and you had to do this pretty much only with the technology? So how did you begin the process?
Having conversations. I mean, we really just had conversations about what are we doing, what is this, what is it, I mean, I think we talked about our performance background also sort of late in the day. We kind of dove in and we're trying to think about what it is that we're doing and how do we connect. So we kind of started actually with the touching nature side of things and figuring out what is it can we touch, what is it that we are able to do, and what can we do to connect, and how maybe we can marry the digital with the analog, and how do we do that. And yeah, and of course Susanne has a background in photography, so we sort of started in that way.
I think we developed quite early on. We basically started with a weekly meeting and conversations and by that connection, and then we did some call and response exercise where we came up with things to do within the frame of the screen. And I think from that and talking around COVID and our situation, quite early on we came to this subject of touch, and we kind of developed two strands quite early on. That one is that we start to come up with the idea of taking photos of touching nature, which was one issue for many people, to reconnect to nature during lockdown. We basically came up with a strategy to exchange physical objects that have been touched by each other, and then you send it to the other person by post and they send it back. And then the other strand was that we did things via trying to touch each other on screen via different games we played, really, or strategies we had.
And we had some props too that we played with. So a lot of the gestures come initially from the props that we were exploring, like string and like that idea of networking and track and trace and those ideas that we were playing with. And then also what is a screen and holding. Susanne found a piece of glass, so we were playing with this idea of, you know, a screen within a screen, this mediation element, and what gestures do we make when we're holding our phone trying to take pictures of ourselves touching nature, and, you know, just some of these kinds of like self-reflective, like what are we doing when we're working with these both analog and tech.
Yeah, initially we also thought about track and trace. And right at the beginning, we actually thought of kind of tracking each other in some way, but we kind of deviated from that. And I think the trace is kind of left in gestures that trace, for example, when we trace each other on the screen or on the trail, kind of invisible trail that the images have left that traveled between each other in our place, because we couldn't really visit each other.
Yeah, I mean it's very interesting. The kind of touching the that is the threshold that will never ever be. You know, it's not something you could ever pass through, and it's actually quite for me watching it was quite a kind of an interesting emotional kind of moment where I first saw that, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" You know, it kind of like it kind of reflects everybody's situation right now, really. And you talked about the screen and the kind of doing stuff within the screen, and what other kind of like difficulties and technical constraints came over strongest, do you think?
Delay, but we were playing also with layering, like how do we show the different elements of being present and being recorded, and how, you know, when we started layering with these different screens, we started getting confused which one's the real one or which one's the recorded one. And so that, even though we didn't really go into much of that about the recorded versus the live and the presence, etc., it kind of became very obvious that we were starting to lose where we were. So that was an interesting development, I guess you could say, like which one is the right one, and you know, who's present now. So that was, I guess, not a problem. It was just an interesting development and outcome.
Yeah, and interesting what you just said, Camille. Issue was also that while we were communicating, connecting while in the meetings, and with certain things we did, we kind of took screenshots as we were doing it. And then all these screenshots became really confusing to find what's the actual real-time Zoom now. Because, and that was, we're really intrigued by the whole layering of the digital analog.
Yeah.
And yeah. Technical for me, technical issues were also that we are kind of, you know, there's issues with internet connection.
Yeah, Susanne was moving around a lot with her.
Yeah, and that also creates delay, not just the latency. And the other is, for example, you have to be on similar operating systems or software versions to actually be able to do things together. For example, I can't run we use OBS streaming software, and I can't use that on my version. So it was also like a negotiation, who can do what, from where, and how we put that together.
Yeah.
Or now, for example, I have to watch the YouTube stream on my phone, because again, the internet can't handle like 2 streams. So it was all lots of little issues to sort out like that.
Yeah, we can't share the screen and stream it and watch it. Like again, it's this layering element of all these different things that we had to figure out solutions, workarounds, just to enable this performance to happen.
Yeah, an interesting thing. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
An interesting thing with that was actually that Camille is streaming it and sees everything, and I'm at the other end and I only see her on Zoom. That's like kind of, I'm not really part of the performance. So I need to find a way so I could see the whole thing as well. So yes, just a myriad of small issues, all bigger ones.
Yeah, she's been watching it on her phone.
So yes, I mean, something that live coder Alex McLean was talking about was getting people together to do stuff in different parts of the world, and I mean, even in kind of like, the West here, where we've got really big issues, and so collaboration in other parts of the world may be really, really difficult, and people are going to have to find other ways around that, and yeah, so technology is wonderful, but it does have its difficulties too, doesn't it? And I'm sure that over the pandemic period, people are going to come up with inventive and innovative solutions to kind of communicate and do creative stuff. So what software are you actually using for this performance?
Zoom and OBS, which is an open source, I think it stands for Open Broadcast System, I think. So it's able to stream and record at the same time. So we'll have a recording of this, and then we have the recording that we're doing of the Zoom. And then, of course, we were using photos on our phones. We were using good old postal service, which is a technology. And my printer only prints in black and white, so some of our photos were layering of color in black and white. We're using old-fashioned printer technology. I mean, they're all technologies, right? And different levels of I don't know, digital elements. But yeah, those are the main ones. Can you think of something else that I hadn't thought of, Susanne, that we used?
No, I think that's all.
Oh,
I was
Google.
just thinking when you're talking about
Google, because we stored all of our stuff in Google.
Document.
And iMovie, because we were making recordings of things. So yeah, actually there were a few other, 5, 6, several technologies.
I think what the layers we talked about earlier are already present now when you say we recorded on Zoom and we recorded on OBS and and there will be
and on YouTube. Yeah, multiple recordings as well. Yeah. And then there's things like Susanne putting things on the website. I mean, there's lots of. I mean, this is mostly a digital performance, right? There were elements of the non-digital. I think the trees and ourselves, but yeah, and that's, I guess, the piece that I'm interested in is this, and have always been interested in this idea of embodying technology by sending some aspect of yourself through it. Of course, there's a whole lot of problems with that as well. But yeah, it's and what we're doing is not necessarily new, but I think it's the necessity of it and the urgency of it that's really been what we've been exploring, and why. Or how we can do something that's performative that still has some kind of I don't know, presence for others.
Yeah, and of course the audience, you can't see the audience, you have no idea who they are. And how did you think about audience when you were creating this? Was it something that you were conscious of, that this is very much not like a live performance which you usually do as performers?
Yes, I think that shows in the different screens we were using, where we kind of try to bring in the idea of that you could question what is live and what is not. It's kind of, if you watch it, like we will of course work it out, but still we're thinking out how can we play with this that it could become confusing, who is performing live and who isn't.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
maybe even with more time, we would keep playing with some of that and figuring out how to do that. With maybe, I think the issue is resolution. After you've edited something a few times, it starts to lose its quality, so it becomes
Yeah, even though
degraded.
I think the resolution, we got a bit of loose frame on the screen, it also loses a lot of quality.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did, for example, think about how could we kind of choreograph it that things are coming in and going out and something's present, then it goes away, it comes back. But within the time frame of the residency, that just wasn't enough time to finalize something like this.
Yeah, I mean, my next question would be, what kind of things have you come up with that you would like to have more time to explore? Because this was a very short residency, and obviously, this what you're looking at is very, very, very broad. And
well, I mean, I think some of these ideas that we brought up in our written essay that we've got on the site kind of talks a bit about where we were going. I think there's a lot of things that we hadn't really had time to think about, talk about, research, go back and try out. And so it was, things like presence and liveness that are ongoing debates in sort of the performance world, in digital or virtual contexts. I think there were things like playing with different technologies, figuring out maybe if there were other ways. Maybe we do something where it was all on our phones, or we hadn't really. I feel like we were kind of rushing to find something to grab onto to put together, and so in that, and of course we have our other lives and things going on. So we had to felt like we had to really grab onto something that we could work with. And so if there was slightly more time, I don't know how much more time, we could sort of go down some of these rabbit holes a little bit more, and then bring out something that might be similar, or maybe a longer choreography, or maybe something slightly just a little bit longer or more developed, or but I think I'm happy with what we've managed to do, because we have a lot of little bits and bobs that we've been collecting and working with.
Yeah,
cool.
I think what I said earlier, with the two big subject areas of actually the screen connection and then the touch, I think that they're now connected through the way we did it and start to explore it. But if you did like a long big work on it, it's kind of two big fields that kind of actually go off or could go off in different directions.
We had a comment.
For me,
Sorry, Susanne. We had a comment I just wanted to share with you. Kate said she thought, I think the not knowing what was live and what was recorded was interesting, and I really felt that in watching.
That's good to know. I kind of glanced on my screen a bit, and it was really interesting when it was all in sync, and then it went out of sync, and then it came back.
Yeah.
And it did look like a homogeneous performance to me.
Yeah.
With like half an eye.
And then it's also like, from my side, I'm looking at the record, what's going out, and I'm thinking, I might mix this up a bit, or I'm going to look at that screen instead of that screen, and trying to think about, is it about watching what's in front of me, or is it about intuitively just kind of going with what we've worked on? And that was also interesting, because if you're seeing yourself, and we were talking about this in the essay, when you're seeing yourself, which is a big point of using these kinds of video conferencing, or so maybe it's not the point, but you end up having yourself in front of yourself, and it's a really weird experience. Like, I often ended up shutting off my own view because I didn't really want to be watching myself. I wanted to be talking to Susanne, and it's these technologies that sort of confuse us and change the way we behave. And when we're trying to do the touching, it's like, which side am I going, and which side is, trying to figure out where on your body that you're coordinating. It literally changes the way you're thinking about how your body's moving, because you're looking at yourself moving. Right? So there's these kinds of things that I think we could have played with a bit as well, like the neurological, or how is technology changing us, right?
Yeah, I think that's, for me, on both of us, I guess the most interesting is not to just come up something we do on screen, but it is actually engaging with what is that actually. And what you just said as an example with the touching, we try to work that out, and then we realize you can also flip your screen. So you can, it just becomes more confusing and more confusing the more deeper you go into the whole subject. And that's, I think, the most fascinating, and has the most potential to explore and expand.
And
Do you?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. Carry on.
I was just saying, and in that, trying to keep your own ability, so objectivity of like, how much have I changed in order to accommodate this system?
Yeah.
And can I see that?
Did you set yourself any limitations at the beginning? Do you think consciously?
Well, we already had a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
In some ways, but I don't know.
Yes. Very, very stringent ones, but is it? I mean, were there any kind of limits in the technology that you were conscious of, and that you initially just said to each other, right, we can't do that because we just can't do it, or it's going to be too difficult?
I think we came up against that constantly while doing it.
Right.
And then also talked about, as I said before, about using other software. And then either there was the issue that either of us can't run it, or B, then it's also the learning threshold, which is another time restrict.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have that long to do this, really, and so that was a massive restriction on you, limitation.
Well, the software as well, like Suzanne's saying, like I'd already used OBS, for example, and I still don't know it very well. There's a lot of features that we probably could have explored that would have saved us a lot of heartache. Like what I just discovered just now, which was figuring out where the audio is coming from. But because I'd explored it a little bit more for another conference where I was, having to record in advance of the conference, that I kind of took that on. So we kind of shared, if I can do something, I'll do it if Susanne can do it. So it wasn't so much a limitation, more like figuring out what skills we have and how we could share the tasks.
Okay, thanks. I have a question. Have you any advice? I mean, for performers who are going to collaborate remotely online like this, because obviously there are going to be a lot more of these kind of residencies and collaborations going on over the next few months and years. So, is there anything that really sticks out?
Oh, communication, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to say the same thing. It's like keep communicating and be really open about what issues come up with technical ideas. Or
yeah, and just making sure you have we had a schedule and tried to stick with it really closely and make sure that we did as much as we could, explored as much as we could. We started dividing up things too, like today we're going to play and do stuff, and the next day we're going to write. And so it's like connecting the action, the practice, and the exploration, and then thinking and reflecting about it. So I think that was really good, and I would advise people to do that so that you don't lose that freshness of what you're exploring and keep documenting and keep track of it and analyze it and go back and discuss it. I think it's this communication, really, just regular communication and regular scheduling.
Well, I think I'm out of questions for now. Do you have anything that you'd like to say extra to this?
I just want to say that Google, you can think about Google what you want, but I think the Google worked for us really well.
Yeah, strangely. I mean, I don't want to promote big companies like Zoom and Google, but they did help in this, and YouTube. I guess that's still Google. And they did help us in this process. I think there are other tools that we could have explored. Like, I definitely think I wanted to try some other ones. But again, that's back to your earlier question about what could we have done with more time. I think yeah, we could explore more tools.
Yeah, I do agree there's probably others, but we kind of, like Zoom and Google, we kind of grabbed what is there already to do this in the time frame.
Yeah. I think artists would have to do that, unless they are actually developing their own software or, have a very long lead-in time, because, time is limited, and unfortunately money is limited too, and time, you get paid for a certain amount of your time. So, yeah.
I guess the other,
thank you.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I guess what we're dealing with is this very square frame with our, our faces at the moment. I think it's going to be really difficult for people to do other kinds of performance, dance, or I mean, we were doing gestures and movement, but so I feel like people need to be patient and try to figure out how to adapt to the constraints of the software.
Yeah, about that a lot because I come from the analog forms and that the kind of the space behind the screen is just really different, and it's also different than performing to camera or.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for your residency and your performance and your answering of the questions just now. Shall we meet up on Zoom in 5 minutes and have a kind of chat about the end of the residency?
Great.
Right. Okay. So are we ending this meeting?